He saw her name light up on the screen at 9:14 on a Thursday evening and did not reach for the phone. That is the part Orla would later struggle to explain to anyone who asked. Not the accident, not the long cold hours on the concrete shoulder of the Canby on-ramp, not even what came after. It was that small thing. The way Beckett looked down at the glow of the screen, registered her name, and set the phone face down on the white tablecloth without breaking the sentence he was in the middle of. Like she was background noise he had learned, somewhere along the way, to tune out. She never made it to the gala that night. If this story makes you stop and think, if you've ever been the person whose calls got sent to voicemail one too many times, hit that like button before we go any further. Drop your city in the comments so I can see where this story travels. Subscribe if you're new, because the stories here don't soften the edges. Now let's go back to where it started to fall apart. The Harbor Light closed at 7 on Thursdays. By 8:30, Orla was the only one still inside. She didn't need to be. Her best friend Tam had offered to stay, had stood in her coat by the back door saying, "Orla, go home," seriously, in the particular tone she used when she was genuinely worried but didn't want to make it into a thing. And Orla had said she was fine, just needed to wipe down the counters, just a few more minutes, said it until Tam left and the door swung shut on the November rain. She wasn't wiping down counters. She was sitting on the prep stool behind the espresso machine with her phone in both hands and a small folded printout from the lab at the Women's Health Center on Oak Street, dated 4 days ago. And she was trying for the 5th time that week to figure out the right way to say what needed to be said. There was no right way. She had figured that out somewhere around day 2. Orla McKay was 34 years old. She owned this cafe, 12 tables, a back garden she kept open until the first frost, a menu written on a chalkboard she redid every few weeks in her own handwriting because she liked the way chalk felt. She had a son named Sully who was 7 and slept with his socks on because he said cold feet in the night were an emergency. She had built the past 3 years carefully, not cautiously carefully, after leaving a marriage that had hollowed her out in ways she was still finding and filling in. She was not a woman who panicked. She was not a woman who needed other people to manage things for her. But this was different. This was Beckett. They had been together for 2 years and 4 months. It had started slowly, the way things do when both people have been burned before and don't trust the kindling. He had come into the cafe in February of the year before last for a cortado and stayed for 40 minutes reading architectural plans spread across the table by the window. He came back the next day, and the day after that, and somewhere in the 3rd week, Orla had said, "You know there's a firm 2 blocks from here." And he had looked up with the particular expression of a man caught doing something he hadn't realized he was doing, and he said, "I know." That was how it started. Beckett Holt was 42. He was the principal of a firm that had recently won a commission to design a community arts center in the Falls Creek area, the kind of project that made the cover of architectural journals and generated the sort of quiet prestige that accumulated like snow. He worked long hours. He had learned to apologize for them the way people apologize for things they have no intention of changing. Orla had accepted this. She had arranged herself around it, quietly, without announcement, the way you move furniture in a room so the path is clear and nobody trips. She had stopped suggesting Tuesday dinners when Tuesday was his late project night. She had stopped texting during his evening client calls. She had learned to read the specific quality of his silence when he was in a meeting and needed to be left alone. She had been doing this for 2 years. She had not noticed until 4 days ago, sitting in her bathroom at midnight with a test in her hand, exactly how much rearranging she had done. The test had 2 lines. The clinic confirmed it the next morning, 8 weeks, healthy. The doctor had looked at her across the desk and said, "How are you feeling about this?" And Orla had said, "I need a moment," which was the most honest thing she'd said to a medical professional in years. She had spent 4 days carrying it. She carried it to the breakfast table with Sully, to the cafe at 6 in the morning when the bread delivery came, to the back garden where she sat with her coffee in the November dark before opening. She carried it the way you carry something when you haven't decided yet whether you're going to put it down or hand it to someone else. There was no right moment with Beckett. There was never a right moment. There was always a deadline, a meeting, a call that ran until 11. Tonight, he was at the Peninsula Hotel for his firm's annual fundraiser gala. He had mentioned it 2 weeks ago. He had not invited her. She had not said anything about that either. She picked up her phone and pressed call. 4 rings. Voicemail. His recorded voice polished. "You've reached Beckett Holt. Please leave a message." She hung up, waited 3 minutes, tried again. 2 rings, then voicemail. 2 rings meant he had declined it manually. He had seen her name and decided, in the moment it took to move his thumb, not to answer. She typed, "Can you call me when you have a minute? It's important." Sent it. Waited. Nothing. 5 minutes later. "Beckett, please. I really need to talk to you tonight." Still nothing. She sat on the prep stool for a while. The cafe was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Sully was at her mother Mags's place in East Vancouver. That was why she had stayed here instead of going home. Because she hadn't wanted to sit in the apartment with all this, hadn't wanted Sully to look up from his book and ask why she seemed like something was wrong. He was 7 and noticed everything. He got that from her. Orla stood up. She folded the lab printout and put it in her coat pocket. She was going to the gala. Not to make a scene. She had never in her life made a scene. She was going to walk into that hotel and find Beckett and take him somewhere quiet. The lobby, the corridor outside the ballroom, a stairwell if that's what it took, and she was going to tell him. Just words. Just the truth, delivered directly. She had always loved him that way, directly, without decoration. If he wouldn't come to her, she would bring it to him. She had been waiting 4 days. She was done waiting. At 9:14, Beckett was at a table near the back of the ballroom with 2 other principals and a city councilor who was deeply interested in the False Creek Commission and wanted them to know it. The room was warm with the amber glow of an event designed to feel effortless, and Beckett was in the middle of explaining a structural detail of the East Wing when his phone lit up on the white tablecloth. He looked at it. Orla. He was 40 seconds from the end of a point the counselor had been clearly waiting to hear all evening. He turned the phone face down and finished the sentence. Across the city, Orla was pulling out of the parking lot behind the cafe. The rain hit the windshield in sheets. She turned the heat up and pointed herself toward downtown. She had tried once more before leaving, a 4th call, and it went to voicemail on the first ring. 1 ring. He had looked at her name and chosen immediately and without hesitation to make her disappear. She wasn't angry. She was something adjacent to anger that didn't have a clean name yet. Something that had been building quietly for 2 years and had finally, in the past 4 days, reached the surface and stopped going back down. She drove. The accident happened at 9:31 on the rain-slicked approach to the Cambie Bridge. The car in front of her braked suddenly, a delivery van that had drifted wide on the curve, and Orla responded correctly, the way she had been driving for 15 years. She pressed the brake, but her tires had been wearing unevenly since September. She had mentioned it to Beckett. He had said he would look into it. He hadn't. The rear of the car stepped sideways. She corrected. The correction was too sharp on wet pavement, and the driver's side caught the concrete barrier with a sound like something fundamental snapping. The airbag deployed. She sat in the steam and debris dust of it for a moment, ears ringing, trying to think. The windshield was intact. Her shoulder hurt. Something warm moved along the side of her jaw. She reached for her phone. It had been on the passenger seat. It wasn't there anymore. The airbag had thrown everything forward. She checked the floor, the gap under the seat, the back seat. Her hands were shaking in a way she noticed only abstractly, the way you observe weather through glass. She couldn't find the phone. She thought, I need to get out of the road. She opened the door and stepped out into the rain. The cold helped briefly, immediate and clarifying. She stood on the shoulder and looked at her car. The left front corner crumpled against the barrier, hazard lights blinking their slow two-beat pulse, and she thought with a strange calm, Beckett doesn't know where I am. Nobody stopped. Cars arced around her in the dark. She stood there for 11 minutes, counting hazard flashes. A woman named Cheryl Bastedo, a retired school principal from New Westminster who had seen the car from the adjacent lane, made a U-turn at the next intersection and came back. She found Orla standing on the shoulder looking at her hands with the expression of someone who has had the frame knocked loose from everything they know and is trying to figure out how to reattach it. Orla said she would not remember saying this. I think I need to sit down. I can't remember what I'm supposed to. And then she sat down on the wet concrete without finishing the sentence. Cheryl called 911 and sat with Orla in the rain with her umbrella over both of them, talking to her about the detour on Main Street, the new library in Burnaby, whether the rain was supposed to clear by the weekend. Orla answered some of it and not others. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. The paramedics noted a laceration to the left side of her jaw, significant disorientation, and what they documented as retrograde confusion. She could answer immediate questions, but could not reliably state her home address or a next-of-kin phone number. Her identification was in her bag. Her bag was in the car. Her phone was never found. She was transported to Vancouver General and admitted as a Jane Doe, female, mid-30s, pending identification. The attending physician noted a moderate concussion, a 3-centimeter laceration, and what he documented as significant retrograde amnesia, extent and duration to be determined. She did not know her name with certainty. She could not retrieve a phone number she trusted. The intake nurse, a large, quiet man named Douglas, who had worked the overnight emergency for 11 years, sat with her through the assessment and spoke to her without rush. At one point, she looked at him and said, "There's something I was supposed to do tonight, something that couldn't wait." He told her they would figure it out together. She was listed as Jane Doe, approximate age 34, admitted to neurology, no next of kin on record, just a blank line where all of that was supposed to be. In the ballroom, Beckett wrapped up the evening at 10:30 and reached for his phone. 3 missed calls from Orla, 2 texts. "Can you call me when you have a minute? It's important." "Beckett, please. I really need to talk to you tonight." He looked at them for a moment. He told himself she had probably figured out whatever it was. He texted back, "Sorry, just out of the gala. Call me tomorrow?" He put the phone in his jacket pocket, collected his coat, and drove home. He slept fine. He had a 9 o'clock with a structural engineer and 3 site visits in the afternoon. He did not think about the word please in her second message, which was not a word Orla used easily, not a word she reached for unless she meant it completely, down to the bone. By 11 the next morning, she hadn't responded. By noon, he had told himself she was busy. It was a Friday. The cafe would be full. By 2, something had settled into the back of his mind, like a stone dropped into still water, spreading its circles outward without stopping. He called, straight to voicemail. He called the cafe. Tam answered, and before he could finish his question, she said, "When did you last talk to her?" He paused. "Last night. She texted me at the gala." "She texted me at 9 saying she was driving downtown to find you." Tam's voice had a quality he had never heard in it before. Tight, like something held shut. "Beckett, she never texted me again." He was quiet. "She wasn't at the gala." "No," he said, "she wasn't there." He heard Tam breathing. He heard the shape of what neither of them wanted to say yet, forming in the silence between them like something solid. "I'll find her," he said. On the 3rd hospital he tried, a woman in admissions asked him to describe who he was looking for. He did 5'6", dark red haircut just past her jaw, a small circular scar on her right hand from a burn at the cafe 2 summers back. 34 years old, her name is Orla McKay. A pause, long enough to mean something. "Sir, can you come in?" The doctor met him in a second-floor corridor, young, careful, watchful. She told him what she could. Moderate concussion, laceration, retrograde amnesia of unknown extent. She's been asking questions about herself since this morning, the doctor said. Her memory of the immediate present is intact. What she can't access is her personal history. She doesn't know who she is? She knows fragments. She knows she works somewhere that smells like coffee. She knows she has a son, a boy, though she couldn't reliably give us his name an hour ago. The doctor paused. She couldn't give us yours. Beckett stood in the corridor and let himself understand, for the first time since calling Tam, that he had not been waiting for a misunderstanding to resolve itself. He had been waiting to find out how bad it was. It was bad. The room was small, blinds half drawn against the afternoon gray. She was sitting up in the bed with her knees slightly pulled toward her chest, looking at the window with the expression of someone listening for something just out of range. There was a white bandage along her jaw. Her hands were folded in her lap, very still, the way they went when she was working through a problem she hadn't solved yet. She looked at him when he came through the door. No recognition, just the careful attention of someone who has learned, over a long and tiring day, to wait before reacting. He stopped inside the doorway. "Hey," he said. His voice came out differently than he intended, quieter. "Hello," she said, same voice, exactly the same. He crossed the room slowly and sat in the chair beside the bed, hands on his knees. "My name is Beckett. I know you. We've been together for 2 years. You own a cafe called the Harbor Light on Granville. You have a son named Sully. He's 7. He sleeps with his socks on." She watched his face the whole time he spoke, listening hard. Not with recognition. He watched for it carefully, and it wasn't there, but with the specific concentrated attention she gave to things that mattered. "Does any of it?" he started. "It doesn't feel wrong," she said. "I can feel the shape of something, a boy, the smell of something baking." She paused, reaching. "But I can't feel it as mine. It's like hearing someone describe a room I've never been in." He nodded. "You were driving to find me last night," he said. "You called me 4 times. He stopped, started again. "I didn't answer, and I'm sorry. That's the most important thing I'll say since I walked in here, and I need you to hear it even if you don't know yet what it means. I'm sorry I didn't answer." She looked at him for a long time after that. Something in her expression shifted, not recognition, but a response to the specific weight of what he was carrying when he said it, the way real sincerity has a texture that lands even when the context is gone. "You look like someone who hasn't slept," she said. "I haven't." "How long have you been looking for me?" "Since noon yesterday." A silence. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. November light came through the half-drawn blinds in thin, pale strips. "I'm tired," she said. "I need you to let me sleep." "Okay." He stood. "What's your name?" she said quietly as he reached the door. He turned back. "Beckett," he said. "My name is Beckett." She nodded, storing it, the way you file something you're going to need to find later. He went out into the corridor and stood with his back against the wall and his hands in his pockets and stayed there until his breathing steadied. Tam arrived at 6 with an overnight bag and Mags 2 steps behind her, eyes red, coat buttoned wrong. Mags looked at Beckett the way she always had, not unkindly, but with the precise, undecorated assessment of a woman who had watched her daughter reorganize her life around a man who kept having somewhere more important to be. "She's okay," Beckett said. "Physically, she's going to be okay." Mags held his gaze for a moment. Then she went past him toward the room. Tam stayed. "She had something to tell you," Tam said. "Not an accusation, just a fact placed down in the space between them. She told me it was important, and she wouldn't say what," she said. Tam stopped, steadied herself. "She said she wanted you to hear it first." He felt this land somewhere between his ribs. "I don't know what it was," he said. Tam looked at him for a long moment. "She's been trying to tell you something for a long time," she said. "What she needed, what she wanted. It just finally had a specific shape last night." A pause. "When she gets her memory back, she'll have to decide what to do with all of it. I think you should be thinking about that, too." She walked to the room. He stood alone in the corridor. She remembered on the second day. Not all at once. In pieces, the way warmth returns to a hand you've been sitting on. First a sensation, then a detail, then a rush that was almost physical in its intensity. Beckett was in the chair beside the bed, and he watched the careful, studied neutrality fall from her face, and something raw and real take its place. "Sully," she said. "He's with your mum. He's fine." She pressed her hand over her mouth for a moment, then lowered it. "I remember," she said. "I remember everything." He waited. Her hands were very still in her lap. She looked at them. "I was pregnant," she said. The sentence went through the room like something structural giving way. He heard the tense. He looked at her face, and before she said another word, he understood what the tense meant. Not as a thought, but as a sensation, something opening up in the center of his chest that had no name and no precedent. "The impact," she said. Her voice was very quiet. "The doctor told me this morning when I asked her to tell me everything. 8 weeks. I'd known for 4 days." She stopped, breathed. "I was coming to tell you that night. That's why I was in the car. Because you wouldn't answer, and I needed you to hear it from me, in person, the way it deserved." He sat absolutely still. "The tires had been pulling for 2 months," she said. "I told you about them." "I know," he said. "I know you did." "I also had a ring," she said. Her voice didn't crack, but something around it was very thin. "In my coat pocket, a plain band. I was going to ask you to marry me that night. I'd been planning it since August." She looked at the window. "I kept pushing it back. There was always the gala, the pitch, the Tokyo call. I kept thinking, after this, at Christmas, when things slow down." She shook her head. "The car hit the barrier and I don't even know when the coat went, or where the ring is now, because I didn't know who I was." Beckett looked at his hands on the hospital blanket beside hers. "I want you to leave," she said. The words were not cruel. They were the most clearly meant 3 words she had ever said to him. "I can't do this in a hospital bed," she said. "I need time, and I need to go home to Sully, and I need to figure out what I still want when I'm not sitting here like this." She met his eyes. "I need you to respect that enough to go." He stood. He picked up his jacket. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and said, without turning, "I'm glad you're alive." She didn't answer. He walked out. He did not make grand gestures. He was aware, with a clarity that felt new and uncomfortable, that grand gestures were a form of noise, a way of filling space that should be left open. He did small, specific things instead. He had the car towed to the mechanic, new tires, brake lines checked. He sent Tam the receipt without comment. He renegotiated his project load, not dramatically, but enough to matter. He stopped taking work calls after 7 in the evening. He told his assistant it was a standing policy, not a temporary measure. He wrote Orla a letter, not a long one. It said, "I have been trying to understand what I owed you that I didn't give. Not what I owe you now, that's obvious. What I owed you before, during the ordinary months when nothing was in crisis. I think I owe you the acknowledgement that I saw what you were doing. The adjusting, the rescheduling, the things you stopped asking for because you'd learned I wouldn't show up for them. I saw it and I didn't change. Not because I didn't love you. I did. I do. But there is a difference between loving someone and choosing them. I kept choosing everything else. I'm not asking you to respond. I'm writing because I need you to know you were never dramatic. You were never temporary. You were the first thing. I just treated you like you were the last." He mailed it to the cafe. Tam called him 2 weeks later. "She read it," she said. "She cried, and then she went back to work, and I think you should know that." A pause. "I'm not telling you this to give you hope. I'm telling you because it's the truth." "I know," he said. "Thank you." She called him on a Saturday in January, while he was at his desk in a small rented office in Yaletown. Quiet rooms, decent light, nothing like the firm, nothing like the old way of doing things. Her name appeared on his phone, plain text, no image. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said. A silence, not uncomfortable, the kind that has texture. "Hey," he said. "I read your letter." A pause. "I've been thinking about something you said, about the difference between loving and choosing." Another pause. I think I spent 2 years hoping you'd choose me without making it obvious I needed you to. Hoping isn't the same as saying. She was quiet for a moment. I'm better at saying now. What are you saying? I'd like to meet, she said, somewhere neutral. There's a bench outside Douglas Fir Park on West 4th, near the playground. I take Sully there on weekends. I've sat on it alone more times than I'd like to count. Tuesday, she said, noon. I'll be there, he said. A pause. The letters were good, Beckett. Her voice was careful but real. They were really good. She hung up. He arrived at 11:50. The January air was sharp and clean, the mountains visible above the tree line in the kind of clear light Vancouver sometimes offered in winter, as if to remind you it was still capable of it. He sat on the bench with his hands on his knees and did not rehearse what he would say. Rehearsing was another form of control. There was nothing to control here. There was only the truth and whatever she decided to do with it. At 12:04, he heard her before he saw her, the particular rhythm of her walk, which he had spent 2 years learning without realizing he was doing it. She came around the bend of the path with her hands in her coat pockets, dark red hair down, and she stopped when she saw him and stayed there for a moment before crossing the distance. She sat at the other end of the bench, not close, not far, the specific middle distance of two people feeling their way towards something without rushing it. She looked at the mountains. I've been angry, she said. I want to say that first, because I don't think I said it properly in the hospital. I said I wasn't angry, but I was. I'm a slow burner. A pause. The real anger came later, when I was home and recovered and had the space to actually feel it. She turned to look at him. I was angry about the calls, about the tires, about August. He did not defend himself. She was right, and they both knew it. I also grieved, she said. Her voice dropped a fraction. I haven't said that to you directly. I grieved what we lost. She stopped, steadied. The pregnancy. I've been grieving it separately from everything else, and it took a long time. Some days it still does. I'm sorry, he said. I should have been there. I wasn't because I didn't know. I didn't know because you were trying to tell me and I didn't answer. Yes, she said, just that. They sat with it. A family passed on the path. 2 kids in winter coats chasing a dog. Parents trailing behind. One of the kids waved at nothing in particular, and both of them watched until they rounded the corner. What I need from you, Orla said finally, is not perfection. I've never needed that. What I need is presence. She spoke evenly, the way she'd worked out exactly what she meant and was saying it that way. When we're together, I need to actually be what you're paying attention to. When something matters to me, I need you to hear all of it. She paused. And I need you to answer the phone. Every time, he said, or I call back within 10 minutes and I tell you why. She looked at him. Something in her face released slightly, not full warmth, but something shifting into a different position, like a door moved an inch. That's a very specific promise, she said. I've been thinking about specifics, he said. Broad promises are easy. Specific ones cost something. She was quiet for a long moment, a full considered silence. Sully has a recorder concert at school in February, she said finally. He's going to be terrible, and he knows it, and he's going to do it anyway. She met Beckett's eyes. I'd like you to be there. I'll be there, he said. She stood from the bench. She adjusted the collar of her coat. She looked at him in the January light, with the expression of someone who knows exactly what they're worth, who has rebuilt that knowledge from scratch without anyone's help, and is extending, clear-eyed, one last offer of something they don't have to extend. Don't make me regret this, she said. Not a threat, just the truth. I won't, he said. She nodded once, slowly. Then she turned and walked back up the path. At the corner, she glanced back, a brief look. Not a movie moment, just a woman checking that the thing she'd said had landed the way she meant it. She could see from his face that it had. She went home to her son. Beckett sat on the bench for a while after she was gone. He did not plan anything. He did not build a timeline or a list or a strategy. He sat in the January cold with the mountains clear above the trees and the sound of the playground just beyond the hedge, and he thought about a recorder concert in February, and then about August, and then about a ring he hadn't known existed until it was already lost. He thought about the kind of woman who buys a ring in August and carries it until November, rescheduling the question, making room, waiting for the right moment, without ever saying, "The right moment is supposed to be the one you make for me." He thought about 4 calls he had declined from a warm ballroom while she was driving through the rain to find him, about tires he had meant to have serviced, about the word please in a text message he had read and set aside and gone to sleep on. He sat until the cold got through his coat. Then he stood up, walked home, and on the way received a work call. He looked at it, let it ring out. Called back from his kitchen at a reasonable hour, having done one reasonable thing first. He texted Orla. "Made it home. Thanks for the bench." 3 minutes later, her reply, a single K. He recognized it. She had mentioned once, early on, that her texts always ran long except when she meant something simply. A K from Orla meant, "I hear you. I believe you for now. Let's see." It was not a happy ending. It was better than that. It was a recorder concert on a February evening, and a bench in the January cold, and a woman who had stopped making herself smaller and started saying exactly what she needed, and a man learning, slowly, specifically, at real cost, that choosing someone is not a feeling. It is a practice, repeated and unglamorous, without applause, until it becomes the thing you reach for first. He put the phone in his pocket and kept walking. The mountains were still clear over the city. The January light had that particular late afternoon quality, brief and honest, not trying to be anything other than what it was. It was enough. It was exactly enough.